If you've ever wanted to make spaceships in Blender, this video is for you. I'm going to break down my exact process for making sci-fi spaceships super easily in Blender. This won't use any paid software or extra add-ons, it's just all inside of Blender and they look fantastic. For this method, I needed it to be three things. First of all, I wanted the ships to be super detailed. Ships like the Millennium Falcon and stuff like that have a lot of detail and little components which look super duper cool. And that can be quite hard to do. So I needed this method to have some kind of way of adding that detail. Second of all, it needed to be low poly. I can't have my viewport being bogged down by millions of polygons. These ships needed to be super easy to render. And third of all, they needed to be fast to make. I didn't want to spend hours and hours and hours on one little section of a ship when I might have 20 ships in a scene. These ships needed to be quick. And so, with all of those constraints, I have come up with what is possibly the greatest method for making sci-fi spaceships really quick in Blender, and I'm going to show it to you right now. This method has 3 steps, and so we're going to get straight into step 1. Step 1 is to model something. I am just opening up Blender, and I'm first going to start by deleting everything. Now, basically here, you just want to start making some kind of shape or anything that looks interesting. I'm just adding a cube, and then I'm going to begin to extrude it out and scale it. Adding loop cuts and insetting and extruding makes up the majority of this workflow. Also, pressing Ctrl B to bevel comes in useful a lot. So I'm just going to spend the next however long making some kind of interesting shape that I'm happy with. Now, it is definitely a good idea to come into this bit with some kind of plan of how you want your ship to look, but if you don't know exactly, that's okay. Another thing about this workflow is that it's super duper flexible. You'll see in here, I model something, decide I'm not happy with it, and then completely change it up at the very end, and that just works. That's what's super cool about this method. I decide at this point I want the ship to be some kind of carrier ship or maybe like recharging station. So I start to build some arms coming underneath the ship to be some kind of like energy transmitter or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, I just think it would be an interesting idea. Continue scaling stuff down, making stuff look very geometric and interesting. Hard lines, hard edges, hard surface modeling. A couple of good things to know is that you can change whether you're going to move stuff on the global coordinates or the local coordinates. I do this a lot. Moving stuff on the local z-axis will work better sometimes than on the global z-axis. It just depends on what you're modeling. Keep that in mind. You can also change it from median origins to individual origins if you want to scale multiple faces individually. But apart from that, you can just basically go on making your own ship. I've just kept working on this for quite a while. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do here, so I would often do some things and then go back, and that's fine, do that. Also, the annotation tool came in not very useful, but you might find it useful. With that, I just continued to model out some shapes that I liked, and at this point I was starting to develop more of an idea of some kind of docking station or carrier ship for another ship, which is what I kind of landed on in the end, though it did take a slightly different form than what I had here. But anyway, basically for this step, model something, and to be clear, this is really easy. Before filming this video, I had actually filmed a whole nother creation of a spaceship, and then realized I'd forgotten to hit record. But instead of just recreating the spaceship I just made a new one, and it didn't take very long. So that's how useful this is, and I will show you those other spaceships I made at the end. But for now, let's move on to step 2. Well done, you've completed step 1. Now on to step 2, texturing. Before you do this step, don't worry if you're not 100% happy with whatever you've modeled. Try to be like a little bit happy with it, but if you're not 100% happy, that's okay. I would still recommend completing section 2, because at the end of section 2, sometimes something you didn't love, you'll actually think, oh, that looks pretty good. Or you'll think, no, I definitely need to make some changes to this. And that's totally okay. I decided that. and it worked fine. You can just change stuff whenever you want. So let's get on with texturing. For this texture, I'm going to be creating a completely procedural texture. So open up the shader editor and make a new material. I called it spaceship material. Now, you're going to add a brick texture and Control-Shift click on it to preview it. You can only do that with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, but that's just free and comes with Blender anyway, so enable that. Next, you're going to start adjusting some of these settings. Make sure that you've UV unwrapped your model. Now, don't worry too much about it. I almost never properly do a good UV unwrap. I just smart UV project or cube project or something like that. See what works, and then you might just want to scale it up or down in the UV editor. Anyway, once you've got a UV map that's somewhat okay, you're going to press Control T on your brick texture and just plug in UV into the vector. Okay, great. Time to get these settings down. You're going to want to adjust the settings until you have relatively large bricks and turn down the offset because we don't want them to look like bricks, just kind of boxes scattered about the place. You can play with the settings however you want. Feel free to use my numbers, but really it doesn't make a huge difference. Do whatever looks good to you. Alright, once we've done that, we're going to duplicate the brick texture and reconnect the UV. Now, with the second brick texture, you're going to make a whole set of smaller bricks. Again, Control-Shift click to preview the texture, and you're going to make the size of the bricks smaller. You can also change up as many of the other settings as you'd like to. You might change offset, scale, brick width, stuff like that. Basically, make a different set of bricks smaller. Okay, once we've done that, you're going to plug the outputs of both of the brick textures into a mix color. Plug them into the mix color, and now we're going to need to create a mask which will plug into the factor. For this, I'm going to use a noise texture. Bring in a noise texture and connect the factor to a color ramp. Turn off normalize, this will make the edges a bit sharper, and change the color ramp from linear to constant. Now, when you change the settings on the color ramp, you'll basically be able to make a texture which looks a little bit like cow skin, just black blotches and white blotches. No real variation between them, just black and white. That's what you want. Once you're happy with it, you're going to plug that into the factor of the mix texture, and now if we Control-Shift click on the mix texture to preview it, you'll see we have blotches of dense bricks and blotches of larger, less dense bricks. We want it to look really detailed, so this is good. Duplicate the brick texture, and with this one, we're basically going to do another small brick texture, but make sure you change the mortar size to 0. We don't want mortar on this one. We're just going to be adding more brick variations everywhere. Feel free to keep playing with the settings like offset and anything you like really. Just play with it, make it look unique. Once you're happy with that, you're going to plug it into another mix shader, which you're going to mix with the output of the other mix shader. I then set the factor to about 0.3, but you can set it to whatever you like. Now, we've essentially got a whole bunch of bricks over a whole bunch of other bricks that are varying between different size bricks. This is good. This is lots of detail, and it can look like lots of paneling and stuff like that. This is basically how our whole color map will be created. So now I'm going to select basically everything except the principled and the output. Select all of that and press Control G to make it a new node group. I'm doing this just to make everything a little bit neater because we're about to duplicate it. Now plug that into the base color and duplicate it, and then plug your new duplication into the normal with a bump node in between. Remember earlier how we used the noise texture to mix those two brick textures together? Well, the bump is actually going to show us those curvy lines. Here's how to fix it. First, click the little 2 button on the node group to make it a separate thing. Now go inside it by hitting tab and then just delete the noise texture and color ramp. This will immediately get rid of those curvy lines and in my opinion, improves the look a lot. Now's a good time to adjust some basic settings on the principled BSDF, put the metallic to 1, and you're most of the way there to texturing. At this point, it could be good to add some kind of roughness map. I just found a random photo of a messy shelf and I chucked that into the roughness map. Does it make any sense? No. But I often find just adding random detail can often work really well. So I know it might sound weird to just put a photo of some rubbish or something into the roughness input, but it actually kind of works really well. We're like 90% of the way there. However, it would look good with some lights on it. Drag out the principled BSDF and plug in a mix shader node. Into the other socket, you're going to plug in an emission shader. Change the color to whatever you want. I'm going with blue, and then turn up the emission strength. Now for the factor. I just used a Voronoi texture and changed the type to Chebychev, the third one. And then by adjusting the color ramp and making sure you're using a UV map again, you're able to make it look like a whole bunch of little rectangles all over your model. You're now going to plug that into the factor of the mix shader node and you will have a whole bunch of little lights all over your model. Well done. That is step 2 pretty much finished. Except you're probably thinking, this looks fairly bad. Well, let's put it in space. Change the mode from object to world and then you're going to make some stars. Now, I've actually got a whole tutorial on how to make night skies in Blender, and I'll link that below, but here's the super duper quick version. Add in a Voronoi texture into a color ramp node, drag up the sides until it looks like stars, and increase the scale. Well done! You're 2 steps of the way through. At this point, if there's anything you don't like about your model, I suggest going and making some adjustments now, rather than step 3. So, make your model exactly how you want to, and then we'll move on to step 3. The third and final step to make perfect spaceships in Blender. And it's basically just add some extra bits and pieces to the spaceship. Thrusters and tanks and anything that makes the spaceship look interesting. I thought, well, this is going to need some kind of propulsion. By the way, these thruster exhaust fiery thingies that I'm using, they're basically just a video of a blowtorch wrapped around a cylinder. I got the idea from a video which I'll link in the description, which shows you how to do it. I didn't do it quite the same way. I found a different way worked better for me, but I did use their base video, so go check it out, link in the description, and then you can make fiery, whatever they're called, yourself. Enjoy. I then adjusted the thrusters till I was happy with them, and then decided it needed a little pop of color or something else somewhere. So I added a cylinder, shaped it into a little tank, and added a yellow old metal material which I made for a different project. If you're followed along with me, you should now have your very own spaceship that you just made in Blender, and you're probably thinking, hey, this looks pretty good. But you can repeat it over and over again, because once you've made the texture, you can reuse that texture. I spent a bit of time figuring out how to make the texture. Once I made it, it only took me another 20 minutes to make a whole new spaceship. And so I made a few of them, which you're looking at right now, including this big one, which I had made whilst recording this video, and then realized I hadn't even been recording. So I made a new spaceship, and now I've got another spaceship. So hopefully you can see just how powerful this workflow is, and how easy it can become to make sci-fi scenes if you just have a good system in mind. Go watch the video you're about to see on screen next.